The night my daughter Victoria threw me out into the blizzard, I was still wearing my apron. Flour dusted my hands as I stood shivering on their porch, watching the door slam in my face. Snowflakes caught in my silver hair, while the cookies I'd been baking for my grandchildren continued to warm their kitchen with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. 67 years old, and there I was, locked out of the very house I had sacrificed everything to provide for them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mother, you've become impossible to live with, Victoria had snapped just moments before. We need our space. You can't stay here anymore. Her husband Derek stood behind her, arms crossed, nodding in silent agreement. I hadn't even been given time to pack a bag or grab my medication. What they didn't know as I trudged through knee-deep snow toward the main road was that I carried something more valuable than luggage, the truth about their precious dream home. A truth I'd kept buried for nearly 20 years. My name is Beatrix Elderflower. I was born in a small coastal town where the scent of salt water mingled with pine. My father worked at the local paper mill, and my mother tended to our modest home with meticulous care. They taught me the value of hard work, honesty, and putting family above all else. Lessons I carried into my marriage at 19 to Henry Elderflower, a kind-eyed accountant with dreams bigger than our tiny rental apartment. We welcomed our daughter Victoria into the world on a rainy April morning in 1985. The moment they placed her in my arms, I made a silent promise that she would never know the hardships I had faced growing up. She would have opportunities I never had: education, security, comfort. I would make sure of it. Henry and I both worked tirelessly to provide for Victoria. He managed the books at a local manufacturing plant while I taught piano lessons during the day and worked evening shifts at the town's only fine dining restaurant. We saved every penny we could, often going without luxuries ourselves, to ensure Victoria had the best of everything: dance lessons, summer camps, designer clothes when her peers started wearing them. When Victoria was 12, Henry was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. The medical bills quickly consumed our modest savings, and for 3 years, I watched my husband fade away while struggling to maintain normalcy for our daughter. I picked up additional shifts, sold my mother's antique jewelry, even cleaned houses on weekends. Anything to keep our heads above water. "Promise me you'll take care of our little girl," Henry whispered to me the night before he passed. "Make sure she always has a good home." I nodded through my tears, clutching his thin hand. "I promise." After Henry died, Victoria and I moved into a small apartment. I couldn't afford our house anymore, not with the medical debts looming over us. Victoria was 15 then, angry at the world, at me, at the unfairness of losing her father. She slammed doors, broke curfew, and made cruel remarks about our downgrade in lifestyle. "Everyone feels sorry for me," she'd spit during our arguments. "The girl who lives in the shabby apartment with her waitress mother." Each word stung, but I understood her pain was speaking. I worked longer hours, took on more students, and somehow managed to put aside money for her college fund. When Victoria graduated high school with honors and received a partial scholarship to a prestigious university 3 hours away, I felt a bittersweet mixture of pride and anxiety. "How will you afford the rest of the tuition?" she asked, her acceptance letter clutched in her hand. "Don't worry about that," I told her. "I've been saving. You just focus on your studies." What I didn't tell her was that I had taken a second mortgage on our small apartment and picked up a third job working early mornings at a bakery. Most days I survived on 4 hours of sleep, but seeing Victoria thrive in college made every exhausted moment worthwhile. She studied business administration, joined the right clubs, and eventually met Derek Hammond, son of a real estate developer and her future husband. Victoria brought Derek home during her junior year. He was polished, confident, and clearly uncomfortable in our modest apartment. His eyes took in the worn furniture and outdated kitchen with poorly disguised disdain. "Your mother works as a waitress?" he asked Victoria later, not realizing I could overhear from the hallway. "Just until I graduate," Victoria replied quickly. "Then I'll help her find something more suitable." I pretended not to hear, serving them homemade lasagna. With a smile. Victoria barely touched her food, mimicking Derek's restrained bites and constant checking of his phone. They left early, Victoria apologizing that they had dinner reservations with Derek's parents later that evening. "We already ate," I said, confused. "Real dinner, Mom," Victoria murmured, not meeting my eyes. After Victoria graduated with honors, she and Derek married in a lavish ceremony largely paid for by his parents. I contributed what I could, draining the remainder of my savings to buy her a wedding dress that wouldn't embarrass her among the designer gowns of her new social circle. At the reception, I was seated far from the main table, with distant relatives and childhood friends Victoria had long outgrown. "Your daughter looks beautiful," a kind older woman told me. "You must be so proud." "I am," I replied, watching. Victoria laughed with her new in-laws, her hand on Derek's arm. "More than words can say." After the wedding, Victoria and Derek moved to the city where they both secured positions at prestigious firms. Our weekly calls became monthly, then occasional. When they did call, it was often with complaints about the cost of city living, their struggles to save for a house, the competitive nature of their jobs. Derek's parents bought his sister a condo as a wedding gift, Victoria mentioned during one call. "They offered us nothing. It's so unfair." I listened sympathetically, wishing I had the means to help them. Then, the unexpected happened. My life changed forever the day Meredith Winters walked into the restaurant where I worked. I had served Meredith for years, a wealthy widow who always requested my section and tipped generously. That evening, she asked me to sit down at her table. After my shift ended, "Beatrix," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for decades. You've served me hundreds of meals, always with kindness and dignity, despite whatever hardships you were facing." I shifted uncomfortably, under her direct gaze. "It's my job, Mrs. Winters." "No," she replied. "Your job is to take orders and deliver food. The grace with which you do it, that's who you are." She slid an envelope across the table. "I have no children, no family left. I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness and have 6 months at most. I've made arrangements for most of my estate, but there's something special I'd like you to have." Inside the envelope was the deed to a magnificent house in Lakeview Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in the region, along with documentation for a trust fund containing $3 million. "I can't accept this," I gasped, trying to return the envelope. "You can, and you will," Meredith insisted. "I've watched you sacrifice everything for others. Now it's your turn to have something beautiful of your own." I was speechless, overwhelmed by her generosity. For weeks after Meredith passed away, I couldn't bring myself to visit the house, still processing the reality of this gift. When I finally drove through the wrought iron gates of Lakeview Heights and parked in front of the stunning colonial home with its manicured gardens, I sat in my car and wept. This house, this beautiful house with its lake view and spacious rooms, was mine. I could quit my exhausting jobs, finally rest my aching knees and back. I could live in comfort for the first time in my life. But as I stood in the grand entrance hall, another thought occurred to me. Victoria and Derek had been struggling to afford a house in the city. This home was too large for just me. Perhaps this was meant for them. A gift I could finally give my daughter that would make her proud of me. That weekend, I called Victoria with the news. "I have a surprise for you and Derek," I said. "I'd like you to come visit next weekend." Victoria sounded suspicious. "What kind of surprise?" "A big one," I replied. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Trust me, sweetheart. You'll want to see this in person. When they arrived, I drove them to Lakeview Heights. Victoria's eyes widened as we passed through the gates, and Derek sat up straighter, suddenly alert. "Who lives here?" Victoria asked as I parked in front of the house. I handed her the key with trembling fingers. "You do, if you want to." They were stunned as I explained Meredith's gift and my decision to give the house to them. Victoria actually hugged me, the first genuine embrace we'd shared in years, while Derek walked the perimeter of the property, already making plans. "The commute to the city is manageable," he mused. "And this address? This changes everything for us socially." I suggested that I could live with them, helping around the house, and with the grandchildren they planned to have someday. Victoria hesitated, looking to Derek, who nodded after a moment's calculation. "The place is certainly big enough," he conceded, "and having you here would save us the cost of household help." And so it was decided. I sold my apartment, retired from my jobs, and moved into the smallest bedroom on the first floor of the Lakeview house. I didn't touch the trust fund money, planning to keep it as a safety net for Victoria's future and her children's education. Only my financial advisor knew about those funds. I decided the money would be a surprise for when Victoria and Derek truly needed it. At first, our arrangement seemed perfect. I kept the house immaculate, cooked meals, and tended the garden, delighting in providing a beautiful home for my daughter. Victoria and Derek thrived professionally, quickly adapting to their new status as residents of Lakeview Heights. They joined the country club, hosted dinner parties for colleagues, and gradually replaced the comfortable furniture I had selected with modern designer pieces. 2 years later, Victoria gave birth to twins, Sophia and Samuel. I threw myself into grandmotherhood with joy, caring for the babies while Victoria returned to work just 8 weeks after their birth. I sang them the same lullabies I had sung to Victoria, rocked them through colicky nights, and treasured every moment with them. As the twins grew, however, Victoria and Derek began implementing strict rules about their upbringing. I was not to give them sweets, tell them certain fairy tales deemed problematic, or contradict any disciplinary decisions, even when Derek's approach seemed needlessly harsh. "Mom, we're raising the children our way," Victoria would say whenever I gently suggested an alternative. "Times have changed since you were a parent." I bit my tongue and complied, not wanting to risk my place in their lives. Over time, Victoria and Derek hosted more elaborate parties, renovated different sections of the house, and joined exclusive social groups in Lakeview Heights. I was introduced to guests as our live-in help, rather than my mother or the children's grandmother. "It's just easier to explain that way," Victoria said when I expressed my hurt. "People understand the concept of household help better than a live-in mother. It's nothing personal." But it felt personal, deeply so, especially when they began discussing my contributions to the household. "The thing is, Mother," Victoria said during one particularly difficult conversation, "food costs have gone up significantly, and we're spending a lot on your groceries." I was stunned. "I do all the cooking, cleaning, and childcare. And we provide you with free housing in Lakeview Heights," Derek interrupted. "Do you know what rent would cost you here? Thousands per month." After that, I began buying my own groceries from my modest pension, careful to keep them separate in the refrigerator. I also started giving the twins small gifts purchased from my own funds: books, art supplies, small toys, treasures they would hide in their rooms away from their parents' minimalist aesthetic. By the time the twins were 5, my relationship with Victoria and Derek had deteriorated significantly. They frequently commented on my outdated cooking, my inefficient cleaning methods, and my overly affectionate approach to the children. I was gradually relegated to household tasks they deemed appropriate, primarily laundry and garden work. The children are in school full-time now, Victoria pointed out. They don't need as much grandmotherly hovering. Then came the winter, when everything changed. Victoria and Derek had planned a 2-week vacation to Aspen with friends from the country club. I was expected to remain at the house with the twins, who weren't included in the adults-only trip. The night before their departure, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom, their voices carrying through the heating vent to my small room below. "I'm tired of living with her limitations," Victoria was saying. "The way she shuffles around, always making those little sighing noises. It's depressing." "She's free childcare," Derek replied pragmatically. "You know what that costs these days." "The twins are in school now. We could hire a part-time nanny who's properly trained, not stuck in outdated child-rearing practices. Besides, you've seen how she looks at us when we discipline them." "What are you suggesting?" "After this trip, we tell her it's time to find her own place. She has her pension. She can get a small apartment somewhere. Not here in Lakeview, obviously, but somewhere suitable for someone in her position." "And if she refuses?" "Technically, she did give us the house, but—" "She won't refuse," Victoria said confidently. "She never does." I sat on my bed, hands trembling in my lap, tears streaming silently down my face. After everything, after giving them this beautiful home, caring for their children, supporting them in every way I could, they wanted to discard me. Like an appliance that had outlived its usefulness. For the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Not hurt, not disappointment, but anger. Pure, clarifying anger. That night, I made a decision. I contacted my financial advisor and reviewed the documentation of Meredith's gift. As I suspected, I had never legally transferred ownership of the house to Victoria and Derek. In my eagerness to provide for them, I had simply given them the key and allowed them to believe the house was theirs. The deed remained in my name, as did the trust fund, which had grown to nearly $4 million with wise investments. While Victoria and Derek enjoyed their Aspen vacation, I spent time with my grandchildren, treasuring each moment and privately, saying goodbye. I knew what would happen when their parents returned, and I was prepared. The day after Victoria and Derek came home, they asked me to join them in the living room while the twins were at school. "Mother," Victoria began, her voice professionally compassionate, the same tone she likely used with junior employees she was firing. "Derek and I have been discussing our living situation." "Have you?" I replied quietly. "Yes, we think it's time for you to have your own space again, your independence." Derek nodded. "We've found several very nice senior apartments about 20 minutes from here. Affordable, too." "I see," I said. "And when would you like me to leave?" They exchanged surprised glances, clearly having expected resistance. "Well, we've actually put a deposit on a unit that will be available next month," Victoria said. "We can help you pack and move your things this weekend." I nodded slowly. "This weekend. I understand." "You're taking this better than we expected," Derek said, relief evident in his voice. "Life is full of surprises," I replied, managing a small smile. That weekend, a heavy snowstorm hit our region. The twins were having a sleepover at a friend's house, and Victoria and Derek had just returned from purchasing storage containers for my belongings. "We should get started packing," Victoria said over dinner. "The movers come on Tuesday." "Movers?" I asked. "You've already scheduled movers?" "Of course," Derek replied, not looking up from his phone. "We're efficient people, Beatrix." The use of my first name, never Mom or even Mother anymore, was the final straw. "Before we start packing," I said carefully, "there's something important we need to discuss about this house." Victoria sighed impatiently. "What about it?" "The ownership," I said. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Derek finally looked up from his phone. What misunderstanding? You gave us this house years ago. Did I? I asked, opening the folder I had prepared. I don't recall ever signing ownership over to you. In fact, here's the deed, still in my name. And here are the property tax statements for the past 7 years, all paid from my account. Victoria's face paled as she stared at the documents. That's impossible. This is our house. We've been living here for years. Living here? Yes, I agreed. Owning it? No. Derek grabbed the papers, scanning them frantically. This has to be a mistake. You gave us this house. I gave you the opportunity to live in this house, I corrected. There's a difference. Victoria's shock quickly morphed into anger. So, what are you saying? After all these years, you're claiming this is still your house? That we've just been, tenants? I'm saying that legally, this house belongs to me, as does the trust fund that came with it. Trust fund? Derek's head snapped up. What trust fund? I placed another document on the table. Meredith Winters left me this house and a substantial trust fund. I've never touched the principal, which has now grown to nearly $4 million. The room fell silent, except for the howling wind outside. Victoria stared at me as if seeing a stranger. You've had millions of dollars all this time and never told us? She whispered. While we worked ourselves to exhaustion? While we budgeted and saved and stressed? About money? I was saving it for your future, I explained. For the twins' education, for any emergencies. I didn't want you to become dependent on it. Derek laughed bitterly. How considerate, all this time watching us struggle, and you were sitting on a fortune. Struggle? I repeated incredulously. You live in the most exclusive neighborhood in the region, belong to a country club, take luxury vacations, and drive imported cars. That's not struggling, Derek. That's privilege. Privilege I provided. Victoria stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. So now what? You're evicting us from our home? Your own daughter and grandchildren? No, I said calmly. I'm reclaiming my home. There's a difference. This is unbelievable, Victoria spat. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, my voice finally betraying my hurt. Relegated me to the smallest bedroom? Introduced me as the help? Complained about the cost of feeding me while I raised your children? Please, enlighten me about your tremendous generosity. Derek stood up, placing his hands on Victoria's shoulders. This is clearly getting us nowhere. Beatrix, I suggest you reconsider this. Power play. We have rights as long-term occupants. Actually, I said, I consulted an attorney. Since you've never paid rent, never had a lease, and there's clear, high documentation that I maintained ownership and financial responsibility for the property, you're legally classified as guests. Guests I can ask to leave at any time. Victoria's face contorted with rage. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? I asked softly. Isn't that exactly what you were planning to do to me? Discard me once I was no longer useful? That's different, Victoria shouted. We were offering you an apartment independence. And I'm offering you the same opportunity, I replied. The chance to live independently, on your own terms. Isn't that what you want? Derek's calculated demeanor finally cracked. This is preposterous. We've built our lives here. Our social standing, our proximity to work, the twins' school, everything is centered around this house. You can't just pull the rug out from under us. The way you plan to do to me? I asked. Giving me 1 month's notice after 7 years of unpaid childcare and housekeeping? Victoria slammed her hand on the table. Enough. You are not taking this house from us. I don't care what legal technicalities you've discovered. This is our home. Not anymore, I said, rising from my chair. I want you both to leave. Leave? Victoria laughed incredulously. It's a blizzard outside. You have cars with heated seats and all-wheel drive, I pointed out. There are dozens of luxury hotels within driving distance. I'm sure you'll manage. Derek pulled out his phone. I'm calling our lawyer right now. Please do, I encouraged. I'll wait while you explain how you've been living rent-free in someone else's property while planning to evict them. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You can't do this to your own daughter. My daughter, I replied, looking her directly in the eyes, would never have treated me the way you have. Something in my tone must have convinced them I was serious. Victoria stormed upstairs, and I could hear her throwing things into suitcases, while Derek made several heated phone calls. I remained at the dining table, surprisingly calm despite the chaos I had unleashed. An hour later, they stood in the foyer with their hastily packed bags. The snow was falling heavily outside, wind battering the windows. The twins will never forgive you for this, Victoria said, her final attempt to wound me. The twins will. Know exactly what happened when they're old enough to understand, I replied, including how I was treated in this house. Derek opened the front door, letting in a blast of frigid air. This isn't over, Beatrix, he threatened. Not by a long shot. I smiled sadly. It was over the moment you stopped seeing me as family and started seeing me as an inconvenience. They left without another word, their expensive SUV disappearing into the swirling snow. I closed the door, leaning against it as the enormity of what I had done washed over me. For the first time, in decades, I had chosen myself, my own dignity, my own worth. The house felt extraordinarily empty, but also somehow lighter. I walked slowly through the rooms that had never truly felt like mine despite the fact that I owned them. Tomorrow would bring complications, arrangements for the twins, legal maneuvers from Victoria and Derek, the inevitable social fallout. But tonight, in the quiet of the snowstorm, I allowed myself to simply exist in this space without apology or explanation. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the window seat overlooking the frozen lake, watching the snow transform the landscape into something new and unrecognizable, like me, like my life from this moment forward. The old Beatrix would have continued sacrificing, continued accepting scraps of affection and respect. But that Beatrix had left the building, kicked out into a different kind of storm, one that had ultimately set her free. The morning after Victoria and Derek left, I awoke to an eerie silence. The snowstorm had passed, leaving the world outside blanketed in pristine white. For a moment, I lay still, absorbing the unfamiliar peace of the house. No rushed footsteps overhead, no hissed instructions about breakfast preferences, no carefully modulated voices discussing my latest shortcomings. Just silence, and the gentle tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I made myself a proper breakfast for the first time in years, 2 eggs with buttered toast and a pot of tea, and ate it at the kitchen island, watching cardinals flutter around the bird feeder outside. The simple pleasure of eating without judgment felt revolutionary. No comments about cholesterol or carbs, no meaningful glances when I reached for the sugar bowl. My momentary peace was interrupted by the harsh ring of the telephone. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. I hope you're satisfied, she said, without preamble, her voice tight with controlled fury. The twins are hysterical. They don't understand why they can't come home from their sleepover. I closed my eyes briefly. Where are you staying? The Parkview Hotel, she snapped. Not that you care. Of course I care, Victoria. The twins are welcome to come back to the house any time. You and Derek are not. Her laugh was brittle. That's your solution? Separating children from their parents? I always knew you were selfish beneath that martyred exterior, but this is beyond comprehension. The old me would have crumbled under such an accusation, scrambling to prove my selflessness. The new me recognized the manipulation tactic. The children are welcome here with me, I repeated calmly. I raised you alone after your father died. I'm more than capable of caring for Sophia and Samuel. While Derek and I, what? Live in a hotel indefinitely? Pay for a new house while you sit in the one we've made our home for years? That was always your plan for me, wasn't it? I asked quietly. To shuffle me off to some budget apartment, while you enjoyed the fruits of my generosity. Victoria was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to the reasonable, slightly condescending tone she used during negotiations. Mother, I understand you're upset about the apartment situation. Perhaps we moved too quickly. But this reaction is extreme, and ultimately self-defeating. The twins need stability. They need their home. This is my home, I reminded her. You've been guests. Long-term guests who forgot their manners. For God's sake, her composure cracked. You gave us this house. Everyone knows it. I never signed a single document transferring ownership, I said. Check the county records if you don't believe me. Why would I have checked? What kind of mother gives her child a house and then takes it back? What kind of daughter treats her mother like unwanted staff? The line went quiet except for Victoria's measured breathing. I could almost see her regrouping, recalculating. The twins' things are there, she said finally. Their school is 5 minutes away. All our lives are built around that house. I'm aware, I replied. I've lived there too, remember, though you've done your best to make me invisible. What do you want from us? Victoria asked finally. Money? Is that it? You've been hiding millions while making us feel guilty for every expense. I want respect, I said simply. I want acknowledgement of everything I've given you, not just the house, but my entire life. I want an apology for the way you've treated me. And then perhaps we can discuss an arrangement that works for everyone. Victoria scoffed. An arrangement? You mean you expect us to rent our own home from you? It was never your home, I corrected gently. That's the fundamental misunderstanding. Here, I'm not having this conversation anymore, she said. Our lawyer will contact yours. Expect divorce papers by noon. The line went dead before I could respond. Divorce papers? What an odd choice of words. Not eviction notices or property. Disputes, but divorce. As if our mother-daughter relationship was a marriage she was dissolving. I sat with my cooling tea, wondering if Victoria had ever truly seen me as a separate person with my own needs and feelings, rather than an extension of herself, a supportive appendage expected to function without complaint or recognition. True. To Victoria's word, a courier delivered a thick envelope at 11:45 a.m. Inside was a formal letter from Anderson, Blackwell and Crane, one of the most expensive law firms in the region. The language was clinical and threatening. Our clients, Victoria and Derek Hammond, have resided at 1428 Lakeview Heights since 2016, establishing the property as their primary residence with the full knowledge and consent of Beatrix Elderflower, who gifted said property to them verbally, if not through written deed. Ms. Elderflower's attempt to reclaim the property constitutes an unlawful self-help eviction and elder financial abuse of her daughter and son-in-law. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of being accused of elder abuse toward my 40-year-old daughter. The letter continued with thinly veiled threats about restraining orders, damages for emotional distress, and the potential involvement of Child Protective Services for my erratic behavior. Instead of panicking, I called Eleanor Winters, Meredith's niece and a formidable attorney who had helped me organize my affairs after Meredith's passing. They're bluffing, Eleanor said after I explained the situation. Without a written transfer of property or any record of payment, they have virtually no legal standing. They're counting on you being too intimidated to fight back. What about the children? I asked, my voice catching. They're threatening to involve Child Protective Services. Eleanor's tone softened. On what grounds? Being a loving grandmother who owns her own home? Don't worry, Beatrix. Their threats are designed to scare you into submission. I'll draft a response that will make their fancy lawyers think twice. I spent the afternoon walking through each room of the house, reacquainting myself with the space Victoria and Derek had gradually claimed as exclusively theirs. The living room with its uncomfortable designer furniture arranged for appearance rather than conversation. The kitchen where high-end appliances sat mostly unused because Victoria preferred ordering in to cooking. The children's rooms, the only spaces that still held warmth and personality, despite Victoria's minimalist aesthetic. In Samuel's room, I found drawings hidden in his desk drawer, colorful crayon pictures of a smiling, gray-haired woman baking cookies with two small children. Grandma's house was written in wobbly letters across the top. In Sophia's room, a handmade book lay beneath her pillow, filled with pressed flowers we had collected together from the garden, each page carefully labeled in my handwriting with the flower's name and in hers with observations. Smells like honey. Feels like velvet. My heart ached with the realization that the twins might be the only genuine connection left in our fractured family. That evening, my phone rang again. This time, a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Elderflower? This is Olivia Chen from Child and Family Services. My blood ran cold. They had actually done it. Yes, I managed to respond. I'm calling regarding your grandchildren, Sophia and Samuel Hammond. I understand there's been a... She paused, searching for the right word. Situation regarding housing arrangements. I gripped the phone tighter. My daughter and son-in-law are currently staying at a hotel because I've reclaimed my home, which they were living in without any legal right of ownership. The children are welcome to stay. With me. I see, Ms. Chen said, her tone neutral. Mrs. Hammond has expressed concerns about your capacity to care for the children due to what she describes as sudden erratic behavior and financial manipulation. I'm 67 years old, in excellent health, and financially secure, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. I've been the twins' primary caregiver since their birth. If anyone has demonstrated erratic behavior, it's my daughter and her husband, who plan to evict me from my own home with 1 month's notice after years of unpaid childcare and housekeeping. There was a pause, and I could hear papers rustling. Mrs. Elderflower, would it be possible for me to visit you at the property tomorrow? It's standard procedure in situations like this. Of course, I agreed. I have nothing to hide. After hanging up, I called Eleanor again, anxiety churning in my stomach. They've involved child services, I told her, my voice cracking. As expected, Eleanor replied, unsurprised. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. This is about pressuring you to back down, Beatrix. They think you'll crumble at the first sign of official involvement. What if they take the children? On what grounds? Eleanor asked patiently. You're their grandmother. You've been their primary caregiver, and you're offering them a stable home. Their same home, in fact. This is a transparent intimidation tactic. Trust me. Despite Eleanor's reassurances, I spent a sleepless night imagining worst-case scenarios. By morning, I was exhausted but determined. I cleaned the already immaculate house, prepared a batch of the twins' favorite cookies, and set out photo albums documenting my years caring for them. If Victoria wanted a fight, she would discover that maternal instinct cut both ways. Ms. Chen arrived precisely at 10 a.m., a young woman with intelligent eyes and a neutral expression that gave nothing away. I offered her tea, which she accepted, and we sat in the sunroom overlooking the garden. This is a beautiful home, she commented, glancing around. Thank you. It was a gift from my former employer, Meredith Winters. She left it to me in her will, along with a trust fund. Ms. Chen nodded, making a note in her file. And you've lived here since? 2016, I replied. When Victoria and Derek moved in, I took the smallest bedroom downstairs. I've been the twins' primary caregiver while their parents worked. Mrs. Hammond claims you suddenly asserted ownership of the house after years of understanding it belonged to them. I smiled tightly. There was never any legal transfer of ownership. The deed has always remained in my name. I allowed them to live here because I wanted to provide a beautiful home for my daughter and her family. I never imagined they would attempt to force me out once they decided I was no longer useful. Ms. Chen's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes, recognition perhaps, or understanding. Mrs. Hammond mentioned concerns about your mental health. Has there been any diagnosis or treatment? I'm in perfect health, mental and physical, I replied firmly. My doctor can confirm this. What you're seeing is not mental decline, but rather a woman who has finally found her voice after decades of self-sacrifice. We continued talking for nearly an hour. I showed her the children's rooms, the garden where we grew vegetables together, the kitchen where I had taught them to bake. I shared photos and the twins' schoolwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. As she prepared to leave, Ms. Chen paused at the door. Mrs. Elderflower, these situations are rarely straightforward. My role is to ensure the children's well-being above all else. As is mine, I said quietly. They're everything to me. She nodded. I can see that. For what it's worth, I don't see any concerns about your capacity to care for them. This appears to be a property dispute that should be handled in civil court, not through our department. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she cautioned. This report doesn't resolve the underlying conflict. The children are currently in limbo, which isn't ideal for their emotional well-being. I strongly recommend working toward a solution that prioritizes stability for them. After she left, I received an email from Eleanor containing her response to Victoria's lawyers. It was masterfully crafted, firm but not antagonistic, laying out the irrefutable facts of my legal ownership while proposing a potential compromise. While Mrs. Elderflower maintains full legal ownership of the property at 1428 Lakeview Heights, she recognizes the importance of stability for her grandchildren. She proposes the following. The Hammond family may continue to reside in the upper portion of the house, with Mrs. Elderflower maintaining her current living space on the ground floor. This arrangement would be formalized through a proper lease, agreement at fair market value, with the following conditions. The conditions included formal acknowledgement of my ownership, respectful treatment as a family member rather than staff, and structured visitation with the twins regardless of future living arrangements. It was everything I wanted: recognition, respect, and continued relationship with my grandchildren. I approved the proposal, and Eleanor sent it to Victoria's lawyers. Their response came 3 days later. A flat rejection, accompanied by a counterproposal. I would sign over the house to Victoria and Derek in exchange for a generous monthly stipend and visitation rights with the twins at their parents' discretion. They still don't get it, I told Eleanor during our phone call. They think this is a negotiation about money. It's the only language they understand, Eleanor replied. But they're negotiating from a position of weakness, whether they realize it or not. The law is entirely on your side. The next day, as I was gardening in the backyard, a familiar SUV pulled into the driveway. Victoria emerged alone, immaculately dressed, despite supposedly living in a hotel. She stood at the garden gate, watching me work for a moment before speaking. You've made your point, Mother. I continued pruning my rosebush without looking up. Have I? What point would that be? That you have power. That you can disrupt our lives on a whim, that we should have treated you with kid gloves all these years. I finally turned to face her. Is that what you think this is about? Power games? Victoria crossed her arms. What else? You had millions all along. You could have bought yourself any house you wanted. Instead, you chose to pull the rug out from under us just to prove you could. I kept the money in trust for your future, I said, removing my gardening gloves. For the twins' education. I never intended to use it for myself. So selfless, Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The eternal martyr, sacrificing everything for ungrateful others. It's your favorite role. Her words stung, but I recognized the defensive attack for what it was. Would you like to come inside? Have some tea? She looked surprised by the offer, but followed me into the kitchen. As I prepared the tea, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. The twins miss you, she said finally. They don't understand. Why they can't come home? They can come home any time, I replied, setting a cup in front of her. You know that. Without their parents? That's your solution? I sighed, sitting across from her. Victoria, what did you expect would happen? That I would quietly accept being discarded after everything I've done for you? That I would meekly pack my belongings and disappear into some sad little apartment while you enjoyed the fruits of my generosity? We offered you an apartment in a nice senior community, she protested. It wasn't some terrible place. It wasn't my home, I countered. This is my home. The home I've maintained, cleaned, and cared for while you and Derek built your careers. The home where I've raised your children. Victoria stared into her teacup. So what now? We just live in a hotel forever while you rattle around in this huge house alone? I've made a fair proposal through my lawyer. You and Derek can continue living here, with proper boundaries and respect for my position as both owner and family member. She scoffed. Pay rent to my own mother? In the house she gave us? I never gave you this house, I said firmly. I allowed you to live in it. There's a difference you've exploited for years. Victoria's expression hardened. And now you're exploiting the situation to force us into some humiliating arrangement where we have to pay you and pretend to respect you to keep our home. Pretend to respect me, I repeated, the words hanging in the air between us. Is that really how you see it? As pretending? Something flickered across Victoria's face, discomfort perhaps, or a moment of self-awareness quickly suppressed. You know what I mean, she said, waving her hand dismissively. The formalities, the lease agreement, the visitation schedule, as if we're divorced parents fighting over custody instead of family. Aren't we fighting over custody in a way? I asked. Over who gets to control the narrative of our family, over who holds the power. Victoria stood abruptly. I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed. I came to find a practical solution. I've offered one. You rejected it. Because it's humiliating, she exclaimed. Can you imagine what people would say if they knew we were paying rent to live? In a house everyone believes is ours? A house given to us by my mother, who's now essentially holding us hostage? And there it was, the real concern. Not the practical aspects of our arrangement, but appearances. How it would look to others. The social embarrassment of having the narrative disrupted. Perhaps, I suggested quietly, the problem isn't that I'm asking for rent, but that you've been lying to your social circle about the house's ownership all these years. Victoria's face flushed. We haven't been lying. You gave us this house. Everyone knows that. Did I ever say the words, I am giving you this house? Did I ever sign a deed transfer? Or did you simply assume ownership because it suited your narrative? Victoria grabbed her purse. This conversation is pointless. You've clearly made up your mind to punish us, regardless of how it affects the twins. The twins are welcome. Here anytime, I repeated. As are you and Derek, under the terms I've proposed. Terms, she spat. Like we're negotiating with a stranger, not family. Isn't that how you've treated me? Like staff, not family? Victoria paused at the door. You know what your problem is, Mother? You've always measured love in sacrifices. Tallying up everything you've given, keeping score, expecting gratitude for doing what mothers are supposed to do. It's exhausting. The words hit like a physical blow. I remained seated, unable to form a response as she walked out, the door closing firmly behind her. Was that how she saw me? as scorekeeping my sacrifices? I had never wanted gratitude, just basic respect and recognition, hadn't I? That night, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Grandma, it's Sophia, using Lily's phone. Miss you? When can we come home?" Tears sprang to my eyes. Home. The twins still saw the house as home, and me as part of that home. Whatever Victoria and Derek might think, the children knew where they belonged. I texted back, "I miss you too, sweetheart. I'm working on bringing you home soon. Be patient a little longer. I love you." The next morning, Eleanor called with unexpected news. Victoria's lawyer reached out. They want to arrange a formal mediation session. "Mediation?" I repeated, surprised. "That's reasonable." "Don't get too excited," Eleanor cautioned. "It's standard procedure before proceeding to litigation, but it does suggest they're reconsidering their position." 2 days later, I sat across from Victoria and Derek in a conference room at Eleanor's law office. Their attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, laid out their revised proposal. Mrs. Elderflower would retain legal ownership of the property, but grant Victoria and Derek a life estate, giving them the right to occupy the house for their lifetime. In exchange, they would provide Mrs. Elderflower with the apartment above the garage, renovated to her specifications, and a monthly stipend for living expenses. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "And Mrs. Elderflower's relationship with her grandchildren. Reasonable visitation would be arranged," the lawyer replied smoothly. "Details to be determined." I studied Victoria's face as the terms were discussed. She sat rigid, eyes focused on a spot on the wall behind me, deliberately avoiding my gaze. Derek, meanwhile, was all business, occasionally whispering to their attorney. "This proposal still fundamentally misunderstands my client's position," Eleanor responded. "This isn't about securing housing or income for Mrs. Elderflower. It's about recognition of her rights and proper treatment as both property owner and family member." Victoria's lawyer leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mrs. Elderflower led my clients to believe the house was theirs for 7 years. Now she's using a legal technicality to upend their lives. We're offering a generous compromise." "A legal technicality?" Eleanor's voice was cool. "Ownership is not a technicality. It's the entire substance of property law." The mediation continued for hours, with proposals and counter-proposals flying back and forth. Throughout it all, Victoria remained silent, her expression unreadable. It was Derek and the lawyers doing the talking, as if the fundamental issue between mother and daughter had been reduced to a real estate transaction. By late afternoon, we had reached an impasse. Their side insisted on permanent occupancy rights with minimal obligations. Our side maintained that any arrangement must include formal acknowledgement of my ownership and establish clear boundaries for respectful cohabitation. "Perhaps," the mediator suggested as the session was about to conclude, "we should address the elephant in the room. Beyond the legal questions of property ownership, there appears to be significant unresolved emotional conflict between Mrs. Elderflower and her daughter. Until that's addressed, I'm not confident we can reach a sustainable agreement." Victoria finally spoke, her voice tight. "This isn't therapy. It's a property dispute." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "Is that really all this is to you?" For the first time that day, Victoria met my eyes directly. Something vulnerable flickered in her gaze before she shuttered it away. "What else would it be?" The mediator glanced between us. "Perhaps the parties would benefit from a private conversation before we continue with formal negotiations." Victoria's lawyer started to object, but Derek placed a hand on his arm, silencing him with a look. "That might be best," he agreed, surprising me. "The legal details can wait." The others filed out, leaving Victoria and me alone in the conference room. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken feelings. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I could ask you the same question, I replied. Why were you planning to send me away, after everything? It wasn't like that, she insisted, but without conviction. We just thought it would be better for everyone if you had your own space. Better for whom exactly? Not for me. Not for the twins who adore having their grandmother present. Better for you and Derek, perhaps, who could finally pretend I didn't exist? Victoria flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you introduced me to your friends as your mother, rather than your household help? When was the last time you asked about my day, my feelings, my life? When was the last time you treated me as a person with value beyond what I could provide for you? Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You make it sound so calculated, so cruel. How else should I see it? You were planning to discard me once the twins no longer needed constant care, like an appliance that had outlived its usefulness. No, Victoria protested, but weakly. We were trying to give you independence. By sending me to live alone in a place I didn't choose, separated from the grandchildren I adore, while you enjoyed the home I provided? That's not independence, Victoria. It's abandonment. A tear slipped down Victoria's cheek. Is that what you think of me? That I'm the kind of person who would just throw away her own mother? Your actions spoke for themselves, I said softly, and they broke my heart. Victoria wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that it made my heart ache. For a moment, I glimpsed the little girl who would come to me with skinned knees and hurt feelings, seeking comfort in my arms. I never saw it that way, she said finally. I thought we were helping you. By deciding my future without consulting me? By treating the home I provided as your exclusive domain? By making me feel like an intruder in my own space? Victoria's shoulders slumped. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. How else should I put it? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her manicured hands. Did you really keep that trust fund for us? All those years? Every penny, I confirmed. I lived on my pension and what I earned helping with the twins. The trust has grown to almost $4 million now. It was meant to be your security, your children's education, a safety net I never had. Victoria's expression shifted, a flicker of something like shame crossing her features. While we complained about money, while we made you buy your own groceries. Yes. She shook her head slowly. Why didn't you tell us about the money? Would it have changed how you treated me? I asked. Would you have respected me more knowing I was wealthy rather than just your mother? Victoria had no answer for that. The silence between us grew heavy with unspoken truths. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted finally. Neither do I replied honestly. But I know it starts with truth, with seeing each other as we really are, not as we wish the other to be. Victoria nodded slowly. The twins ask about you every day. They don't understand why they can't come home. Home, I repeated softly. It's still home to them. To all of us, Victoria admitted. The hotel is sterile, impersonal. Even Derek, who pretends nothing bothers him, is struggling. I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. I never wanted to make you homeless, Victoria. I wanted you to understand what you were doing to me, how it felt to be discarded, to have your home taken away without consideration for your feelings. Victoria didn't respond immediately. She stared out the window at the downtown skyline, lost in thought. Mother, she said finally, turning back to me. If we start over, if we come back, things have to be different, for all of us. That's all I ever wanted, I said. To be treated as family, not staff. To be respected as the homeowner, not tolerated as an inconvenient guest. Victoria nodded slowly. I can't promise we'll never disagree, that there won't be tension or adjustments, but I can promise to try seeing things from your perspective. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the hurt she'd caused, but it was a start. A small opening where light might eventually shine through. The twins can come home tonight, I said. You and Derek as well, if you're willing to continue discussions about a formal arrangement. Relief washed over Victoria's face. Thank you, she whispered. When the lawyers and Derek returned, we outlined a preliminary agreement. The Hammonds would return to the house while we continued to work on a formal arrangement. I would retain my bedroom and have full use of common areas. There would be family dinners 3 times a week, and I would continue to care for the twins after school. Most importantly, Victoria and Derek acknowledged in writing that I was the legal owner of the property, and any future arrangement would be based on that reality. As we signed the interim agreement, Derek leaned toward me, speaking quietly so only I could hear. For what it's worth, I was against sending you to that apartment. Victoria was convinced it was for your own good. I should have spoken up more forcefully. I studied his face, surprised by this unexpected confession. Derek had always been polished and remote, more concerned with appearances than emotions. This glimpse of conscience was unexpected. Thank you for telling me, I replied simply. That evening, the twins burst through the front door, their faces alight with joy. Grandma! They cried in unison, launching themselves into my arms with such force I nearly toppled backward. We missed you so much, Sophia whispered, her arms tight around my neck. The hotel didn't have your cookies, Samuel added solemnly, as if this were the greatest tragedy imaginable. I laughed, holding them close, breathing in their familiar sense of shampoo and childhood. I missed you too. More than you can possibly... No. Over their heads, I caught Victoria's eye. She stood in the doorway, watching our reunion with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between wistfulness and realization. Perhaps she was remembering her own childhood embraces, or perhaps she was seeing for the first time the depth of bond between her children and me. The following weeks brought an uneasy truce to our household. Victoria and Derek were unfailingly polite, if somewhat stiff, carefully navigating the new reality of our shared space. I maintained my own routines while trying to respect their privacy. The twins, blissfully unaware of the complex adult dynamics swirling around them, simply rejoiced in having their family intact again. Eleanor continued negotiations with Victoria's lawyer, working toward a more permanent arrangement. The current proposal would formalize my ownership while granting Victoria and Derek a long-term lease at a nominal rate, with provisions for my continued residence and specified rights regarding common areas in the garden I loved. It's a good compromise, Eleanor assured me over tea in her office. You maintain ownership and dignity, they maintain stability and face-saving, and everyone acknowledges the reality of the situation. I nodded, stirring honey into my cup. And if I die? What happens then? Eleanor eyed me carefully. That depends on your will. Currently, Victoria would inherit as your only child. Is that still your intention? The question gave me pause. After everything that had happened, did I still want Victoria to inherit the house and trust fund? The hurt she had caused ran deep, but she was still my daughter, the only family I had besides the twins. I need to think about it, I said finally. Perhaps there's a way to ensure the twins' future, while also acknowledging Victoria's place in my life. There are options, Eleanor assured me. Trusts can be structured with specific conditions. We can discuss those when you're ready. That evening, I found Victoria alone in the kitchen, absently stirring a cup of tea. The twins were in bed, and Derek was working late. May I join you? I asked, pausing in the doorway. She nodded, gesturing to the chair across from her, sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before Victoria spoke. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we treated you, I waited, giving her space to continue. "When did it start?" she asked, her voice soft with self-reflection. "When did I stop seeing you as my mother and start seeing you as— I don't even know what." "An obligation," I suggested gently. "A complication in your perfect life." Victoria winced but didn't deny it. I wanted so badly to fit into Derek's world, to be accepted by his colleagues and their wives. They all came from money, from polished backgrounds with summer homes and private schools. And there I was, the scholarship girl with the waitress mother. "You were ashamed of me," I said, the realization bringing a fresh wave of hurt despite its obviousness. "Not of you," Victoria protested, then reconsidered. "Not exactly. More of what you represented. A life of struggle, of financial insecurity, everything I had worked so hard to escape." "You never had to escape anything," I pointed out. "You had a home, education, opportunities. I made sure of that." "At what cost to yourself?" Victoria asked, surprising me with her insight. "You worked yourself to exhaustion. You gave up having a life of your own." How was I supposed to feel about that except guilty? And guilt is an uncomfortable emotion, Mother. It's easier to reframe it as something else. "Like resentment," I suggested. Victoria nodded slowly. "I resented the sacrifices you made because they made me feel responsible for your happiness. For your whole life, really. That's a heavy burden for a child, even an adult child. I had never considered that perspective before, that my sacrifices might have weighed on Victoria rather than freed her. That in trying to give her everything, I might have unwittingly given her a sense of indebtedness she couldn't bear. "I never meant to burden you," I said quietly. "I wanted to give you opportunities I didn't have." "I know," Victoria replied. "But somewhere along the way, I started seeing your generosity as a kind of control. A way of keeping me obligated to you. It was easier to push you away, to minimize your contributions than to live with that feeling." The insight stung, but there was truth in it I couldn't deny. Perhaps there had been times when I'd wielded my sacrifices like a sword, expecting gratitude and deference in return. When I'd measured Victoria's love by how completely she acknowledged my contributions. "We've both made mistakes," I acknowledged. Victoria reached across the table and took my hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact in years. "I want to do better. For the twins. For you. For all of us." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, Derek returning from work. Victoria squeezed my hand once before letting go, offering me a tentative smile that felt like the first tender shoot of something new growing between us. The following Saturday, Derek suggested a family outing to the botanical gardens. The twins loved the butterfly pavilion, and the early summer blooms were at their peak. To my surprise, he explicitly included me in the invitation. "The whole family should go," he said, catching my eye with a meaningful look. "It's been too long since we did something together." The day was lovely. Warm sunshine, the gardens bursting with color, the twins running ahead on the paths with unbridled enthusiasm. Victoria walked beside me, pointing out particularly beautiful arrangements, asking my opinion on plants she was considering for our garden. It felt almost normal, as if the fractures in our relationship were slowly knitting together. During lunch at the garden cafe, Derek's phone rang. He excused himself to take the call, returning a few minutes later with a troubled expression. "Everything okay?" Victoria asked. "Just work," he replied. But his tone was off, his eyes not quite meeting hers. I noted the exchange but said nothing, focusing instead on helping Samuel with his sandwich. That evening, after the twins were in bed, I heard raised voices from Victoria and Derek's bedroom. Though I couldn't make out the words, the tension was unmistakable. I retreated to my room, not wanting to eavesdrop, but concerned about this new development. My worry deepened when I came down for breakfast the next morning to find Victoria alone at the kitchen island, eyes red from crying. "Are you all right?" I asked, setting aside the complicated dynamics between us in the face of her obvious distress. Victoria looked up, startled. She quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm fine. Just tired." "Victoria," I said gently. "Something's clearly wrong. Can I help?" For a moment, I thought she might maintain the pretense, but then her shoulders slumped. "It's Derek," she admitted. "His company is in trouble. Serious trouble." I sat beside her. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've lost several major clients, and there are rumors of accounting irregularities. Derek says it's just temporary, that they'll weather the storm, but—" She trailed off, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "You're not convinced," I finished for her. Victoria shook her head. "He's been different lately, secretive, working late hours, taking calls in private. I thought—" She swallowed hard. "I thought maybe he was having an affair, but last night he finally told me the truth. The company might go under and there could be legal implications. For Derek personally?" "He swears he's done nothing wrong," Victoria said, though her tone lacked conviction. "But he was on the Financial Oversight Committee, if there was wrongdoing that he should have caught." I processed this information, understanding the implications for our family. "Have you spoken with a lawyer? Someone separate from Derek's company?" Victoria shook her head. "I don't want to believe it's that serious. He promised it would all blow over." I hesitated, not wanting to overstep during this fragile period of reconciliation, but concerned enough to press further. "Victoria, if there's a chance of legal trouble, you need to protect yourself and the twins, regardless of whether Derek is personally involved." She looked up, surprised by my practical approach rather than emotional reassurance. "You think I should prepare for the worst." "I think you should be informed," I clarified. "Knowledge is protection." Victoria considered this, then nodded slowly. "I should talk to a lawyer, just to understand our options." "I know someone," I offered. "Eleanor has colleagues who specialize in financial matters. She can recommend someone discreet." "Would you—" Victoria hesitated, vulnerability etched across her features. "Would you come with me? When I speak with them?" The request touched me deeply. After years of being excluded from important decisions, Victoria was actively seeking my support. "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." 2 days later, we sat in a sleek downtown office across from Patricia Alvarez, a sharp-eyed financial attorney recommended by Eleanor. Victoria had brought financial statements, property records, and copies of tax returns, all obtained from Derek's home office while he was at work, a fact that clearly distressed her. "I feel like I'm betraying him," she confessed as we waited. "Going behind his back like this." "You're protecting your children," I reminded her. "There's nothing disloyal about that." Patricia's assessment was both professional and concerning. Based on the documents Victoria had provided and the public information about Derek's company, there were legitimate reasons for caution. "The company appears to be in significant financial distress," Patricia explained, "and the timing of certain transactions raises questions that might interest regulatory authorities. I'm not suggesting your husband is personally culpable, but as a member of the Oversight Committee, he could face scrutiny." "What should I do?" Victoria asked, her voice small. "First, separate your finances as much as possible without alerting your husband," Patricia advised. "Establish accounts in your name only. Secure important documents and valuables. If your husband has guaranteed business loans with personal assets, identify which ones might be at risk." Victoria's face paled. "The house," she whispered, looking at me. "If there are judgments against Derek." Patricia glanced between us. I understand the house is actually owned by Mrs. Elderflower, correct? With no formal transfer of ownership to either you or your husband. That's right, I confirmed. Then the house should be protected, Patricia said. But any other joint assets could be vulnerable. We should review everything thoroughly. As we left the meeting, Victoria was quiet, processing the severity of their potential situation. In the taxi back home, she suddenly reached for my hand. Thank you, she said softly, for coming with me, for not saying, I told you so. I squeezed her hand gently. What kind of mother would gloat about her daughter's troubles? Victoria gave me a sad smile. The kind of daughter I've been would probably deserve it. Over the next week, Victoria followed Patricia's advice, discreetly separating finances and securing important documents. Derek, increasingly preoccupied with the crisis at his company, seemed barely to notice the changes at home. He came home later each evening, distracted and tense, offering brief kisses to the twins before retreating to his home office with a tumbler of scotch. One evening, Victoria knocked softly on my bedroom door. When I opened it, she stood in the hallway looking smaller somehow, less certain than the polished professional she normally presented to the world. Can we talk? She asked. I invited her in, and she perched on the edge of my reading chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Derek's company is being investigated by the SEC, she said without preamble. He just told me they've frozen certain accounts, and they're reviewing years of financial records. I'm so sorry, I said, genuinely concerned despite my complicated feelings about Derek. Does he have good legal representation? Victoria nodded. The company has attorneys, but Patricia recommended he retain personal counsel as well. The interests of the company and its executives may not align if things get worse. And financially? I asked gently. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. We're not in immediate danger. I've secured our primary accounts as Patricia suggested. But if there are fines or settlements... She trailed off, the implications hanging in the air between us. I took a deep breath, making a decision I'd been contemplating since our first meeting with Patricia. Victoria, I want you to know that regardless of what happens with Derek's situation, you and the twins will always have a home here, and if necessary, I can help with legal expenses from the trust fund. Victoria looked up, surprised. You'd do that? After everything? You're my daughter, I said simply. And they're my grandchildren. Whatever has happened between us doesn't change that. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. I don't deserve your help. It's not about deserving, I told her. It's about family. Real family, not the performance. Of family we've been acting out all these years. Victoria wiped her eyes. I don't even know how we got so lost from each other. One small decision at a time, I suggested. One moment of choosing appearance over authenticity. One priority, misplaced. Until suddenly, we were strangers living in the same house. Victoria nodded slowly. I want to find our way back, she whispered. I need my mother right now. The real one, not the convenient grandmother who stays out of sight when my friends come over. The raw honesty of her admission broke something open inside me, a door long sealed shut against disappointment and hurt. I'm right here, I said, opening my arms. I've always been right here. Victoria moved into my embrace, her body shaking with silent sobs as I held her, stroking her hair as I had when she was small. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, we were simply mother and daughter, without pretense or performance. In the days that followed, a subtle shift occurred in our household dynamics. Victoria began consulting me about decisions regarding the twins, genuinely seeking my input rather than issuing directives. She spoke openly about her concerns regarding Derek's situation, no longer maintaining the veneer of perfect family life. Most significantly, she invited me to a dinner party she hosted for colleagues, introducing me properly as her mother, including me in conversations. even sharing the story of how I had cared for her after her father's death. Derek, meanwhile, grew increasingly withdrawn. The investigation into his company expanded, with several executives placed on administrative leave pending further inquiry. Though he maintained his innocence of any deliberate wrongdoing, the stress etched itself into his face, aging him visibly. One evening, I found him alone on the back patio, staring into the darkness with a half-empty glass of scotch in his hand. "May I join you?" I asked. He gestured vaguely to the chair beside him, not speaking. We sat in silence for several minutes before he finally spoke. "You must be enjoying this," he said, his voice rough with bitterness. "Watching my life implode while you sit securely in the house you reclaimed." "I take no pleasure in your troubles, Derek," I replied evenly. "Or in the worry they're causing Victoria and the twins." He gave a harsh laugh. "Saint Beatrix, above such petty emotions as satisfaction at an enemy's downfall." "Are we enemies?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perception. "I never thought of us that way." Derek took another sip of his drink. "Perhaps not enemies. Competitors, then, for Victoria's loyalty, for position in this household." "It wasn't a competition until you made it one," I pointed out. "There was room for both of us in Victoria's life, in this home." "Was there?" he challenged. "You were always there, always watching, judging our parenting, our lifestyle. The living embodiment of Victoria's humble origins, which she's worked so hard to transcend." "Is that how you see me? As some sort of class reminder Victoria needed to shed?" Derek didn't answer directly. "Do you know what it's like?" he asked instead. "To watch your wife defer to someone else's judgment? To feel like an outsider in your own home because there's this prior claim on your family's affection and loyalty?" I considered his words, trying to see our shared history from his perspective. "I never intended to undermine you, Derek. I only wanted to help, to be part of my daughter's life and my grandchildren's upbringing." "Your help came with strings," he said flatly, "with expectations about how we should live, how we should parent, with subtle reminders of your sacrifices and Victoria's debt to you." The accusation echoed Victoria's earlier words about feeling burdened by my sacrifices. Was there truth in it? Had my presence, my history of giving, created a weight that derailed their momentum rather than supporting it? "Perhaps we've all made mistakes," I conceded. "But hiding the truth about the house, planning to send me away without discussion, those weren't solutions. They were evasions." Derek drained his glass. "Maybe," he acknowledged, surprising me with even this small concession. "But now it's all academic, isn't it? If this investigation goes where I think it might, none of us will be living in this house much longer." "What do you mean?" I asked, alarm rising. "Legal fees, potential settlements, reputation damage," Derek listed flatly. "Even with Victoria's attempts to separate our finances, the reality is that my career is likely over. No firm will touch me after this, regardless of the outcome. We'll have to downsize dramatically, probably leave Lakeview Heights altogether." "Unless I choose to help," I said quietly. Derek's head snapped up, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What?" "The trust fund," I reminded him. "It exists for exactly this kind of situation, to provide security when circumstances threaten the family's stability." "Victoria mentioned you'd offered," he said slowly. "I assumed it was just talk." "I don't make empty offers," I replied, "especially not about my grandchildren's security." Derek studied me, confusion evident in his expression. "Why would you help me after how I've treated you? After I supported sending you away?" "I'm not helping you," I clarified. "I'm helping Victoria and the twins. But that help can extend to legal representation for you, if needed, because your situation affects them directly." Derek was silent for a long moment, absorbing this information. I don't understand you, he said finally. You had every reason to wash your hands of us, to enjoy watching our comeuppance. Instead, you're offering a lifeline we don't deserve. That's where you're wrong, I told him. Family isn't about deserving. It's about belonging, through good decisions and bad ones, through pride and humility, through success and failure. I don't know if I can accept help from you, Derek admitted, pride battling with practicality in his expression. It would mean acknowledging how wrong I was, about the house, about you, about everything. Sometimes, I said gently, admitting, we were wrong is the first step toward becoming right. Derek didn't respond, but as he stood to go inside, he paused beside my chair. Thank you, he said stiffly, the words clearly costing him. For the offer. I'll consider it. As I watched him walk back to the house, shoulders slumped under the weight of impending professional disgrace, I felt an unexpected pang of compassion. Derek had been wrong about many things, had treated me poorly, had supported Victoria's plan to discard me. But he was also a father who loved his children, a husband trying to maintain his family's lifestyle, a man facing the collapse of everything he had built. In that moment, I understood that true forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the hurt or pretending it never happened. It was about seeing the full humanity of those who had wounded you, their flaws and strengths, their cruelty, and their capability for growth. It was about creating space for redemption, not because they deserved it, but because without that possibility, we all remained trapped in our worst moments. I remained on the patio long after Derek had gone inside, watching the stars emerge in the night sky, contemplating the strange turns life had taken. 6 months ago, I had been the invisible grandmother, tolerated, but not truly seen. Now I was the family's potential savior, the one with the power to preserve or withhold security. The irony wasn't lost on me. By standing up for myself, by refusing to be discarded, I had reclaimed not just my home, but my central place in the family. Not as a servant or convenience, but as the matriarch I had always been. The morning newspaper arrived with Derek's company. Splashed across the front page, Halcyon Financial under federal investigation, executives face scrutiny. I quickly folded it and tucked it under a stack of mail before the twins came down for breakfast. They were too young to understand the implications, but children absorb more than adults realize. Their fathers' tense silences, their mothers' tearful phone calls, these had not gone unnoticed. "Grandma, is Daddy in trouble?" Sophia asked as I placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of her. Her blue eyes, so like Victoria's, were wide with concern beyond her years. "Your daddy is dealing with some complicated grown-up problems at work," I explained carefully. "But he loves you very much, and that will never change." "Is that why Mom was crying in the bathroom?" Samuel asked, stirring honey into his oatmeal with unusual concentration. "And why Daddy sleeps in the guest room now?" I hadn't realized. The twins had noticed these details. Children miss nothing in their homes, especially changes in the emotional landscape. "Your parents are worried about different things," I said, choosing honesty without alarming them. "Sometimes when grown-ups are worried, they need a little space to think, but they both love you more than anything in the world." The twins seemed satisfied with this explanation, at least temporarily. After breakfast, I walked them to the end of the driveway where they boarded the school bus, waving until it disappeared around the corner. When I returned to the kitchen, Victoria was sitting at the island, the unfolded newspaper in front of her. Her face was pale but composed. "The twins are asking questions," I told her, pouring myself a fresh cup of tea. "About why Derek is sleeping in the guest room." Victoria sighed. "I know. I should talk to them properly. I don't know what to say." "How do you explain to a 7-year-old that their father might go to jail?" The bluntness of her statement surprised me. "Is it that serious?" The SEC investigators interviewed Derek yesterday, Victoria said, her voice flat with exhaustion. They have emails suggesting he was aware of discrepancies in the financial reporting, but failed to address them adequately. His attorney says they're building a case for negligence at minimum, possibly complicity. What does that mean in practical terms? Victoria rubbed her temples. Best case? Civil penalties, professional sanctions, probably the end of his career in finance. Worst case? Criminal charges, prison time. I absorbed this sobering assessment. And financially? His assets will be frozen if formal charges are filed. Our joint accounts could be affected, though Patricia thinks we've done enough to insulate my separate funds. Victoria looked up at me, vulnerability evident in her eyes. The rent on the extended stay hotel is covered for another 2 weeks. After that... I sat beside her, placing my hand over hers. You don't need to worry about housing. This is your home, Victoria. Yours and the twins. And Derek's? She asked softly. The question gave me pause. My offer of financial support had been genuine, but I hadn't fully considered what it might mean if Derek faced criminal charges. Would I be harboring someone awaiting trial? Providing sanctuary to a man who had treated me with such dismissive contempt? Let's cross that bridge when we come to it, I said carefully. For now, let's focus on stability for the children. Victoria nodded, seemingly relieved not to face that particular decision yet. I have a job interview tomorrow, she said, changing the subject. At Meridian Partners. It's not as prestigious as my current position, but their corporate culture is supposed to be more family-friendly, and they're far enough removed from halcyon circles that my association with Derek won't necessarily be a liability. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased she was taking proactive steps. Shall I pick up the twins from school so you can prepare? Would you mind? Victoria asked, sounding grateful. I should review their client list, refresh myself on their recent projects. Of course, I assured her. That's what family is for. A ghost of a smile crossed Victoria's face. Family, she repeated softly. It's strange how I never truly valued what that meant until everything else started falling apart. That afternoon, I collected the twins from school and took them to the park, hoping physical activity might distract them from the unusual tensions at home. As they raced around the playground, I sat on a bench watching them, marveling at their resilience. Despite the strained atmosphere at home, they laughed and played, finding joy in the simple pleasure of sunshine and movement. Mrs. Elderflower? A voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see Susan Blackwood, a neighbor from 3 doors down. She was dressed in tennis whites, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed despite the humid afternoon. I thought that was you. I haven't seen you at the neighborhood association meetings lately. I've been rather occupied with family matters, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Susan was notorious for collecting and disseminating neighborhood gossip. She sat uninvited beside me, leaning in conspiratorially. I couldn't help noticing that Derek hasn't been home much. And now this dreadful business in the news about Halcyon Financial? Victoria must be beside herself. The calculating gleam in Susan's eyes belied her sympathetic tone. She wasn't concerned. She was hungry for details to share at her next luncheon. We're managing well, thank you, I said firmly. Family supports each other through challenges. Susan's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. Of course, though I must say it's remarkable how. Understanding your being, given everything. Everything? I echoed, wondering what she knew, or thought she knew, about our family dynamics. Susan lowered her voice, though there was no one nearby to overhear. Well, it's not my place to say, but several of us noticed how they sidelined you at social functions. Victoria introducing you as the children's caregiver at the school fundraiser last year was particularly awkward. And then suddenly, you're back in the picture. Just as Derek's career implodes. Quite the timing. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, part embarrassment that our family issues had been neighborhood fodder, part anger at Susan's transparent fishing expedition. Family relationships are complex, Susan, I said, keeping my voice level. They evolve and sometimes require adjustment, but they remain family. Susan looked disappointed by my diplomatic response. Well, if you need anything, the neighborhood association is here to support you. All of you, she added with a meaningful look, though I imagine some members might have questions about Derek's continued presence in Lakeview Heights, given the circumstances. The association does have certain standards regarding— Standards? I interrupted, unable to contain my indignation any longer, such as kindness, compassion, support during difficult times. Or do your standards only extend to property values and lawn maintenance? Susan recoiled slightly, clearly taken aback by my directness. I know exactly what you meant, I said, rising from the bench. And I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your concern and your standards to yourself. My family doesn't need your particular brand of support. I called to the twins, who came running immediately, sensing something in my tone. As we walked home, Sophia looked up at me curiously. Was that lady being mean, Grandma? She asked. I softened my expression, not wanting to burden them with adult pettiness. Not mean, exactly. Just not very thoughtful about other people's feelings. Dad says people like that are empty inside, Samuel offered matter-of-factly. That's why they need to fill themselves up with other people's business. I bit back a smile at his unintentional wisdom. Your father might be right about that. When we arrived home, Victoria was in the kitchen preparing dinner, an unusual sight given her typical reliance on delivery services or my cooking. She had changed from her business attire into jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered from before. Wealth and status became her defining concerns. I'm making lasagna, she announced as the twins burst into the kitchen. It probably won't be as good as Grandma's, but I thought we could use some comfort food. The twins exchanged surprised glances before Samuel asked cautiously, Can we help? Victoria's face lit up. Absolutely. Samuel, you can tear the lettuce for the salad. Sophia, would you set the table? A proper family dinner. I watched as Victoria guided the children through their tasks, patient in a way I hadn't seen in years. She caught my questioning look and shrugged slightly. I realized I don't know my own children's food preferences, she said quietly, while the twins were busy with their assignments. Samuel told Derek he doesn't like broccoli last week, and I was shocked because I thought it was one of his favorites. Then I realized I didn't actually know. You've been the one feeding them most meals. It's never too late to learn these things, I assured her. Victoria nodded, a determined set to her jaw. I've missed too much already being so focused on appearances and career. I don't want to miss any more. We ate dinner together, the four of us around the kitchen table rather than in the formal dining room. The conversation was lighter than it had been in weeks, centered around the twins' school projects and playground politics. For a brief time, the shadow of Derek's troubles receded, allowing a glimpse of what our family life could be. After the twins were in bed, Victoria and I sat in the living room with cups of herbal tea. The house felt different somehow, warmer, more lived in, despite Derek's continued absence. He had called earlier to say he was meeting with his attorneys and would be staying at a colleague's apartment in the city. I had an unusual encounter with Susan Blackwood at the park today, I mentioned, watching Victoria's reaction carefully. She grimaced. Let me guess, fishing for gossip about Derek while pretending to be concerned? More or less, I confirmed. She also made some interesting comments about how I was introduced at various functions. Victoria had the grace to look embarrassed. The school fundraiser, she said, when I called you the children's caregiver. Among other occasions, apparently. Victoria set down her mug, meeting my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Mother. Truly. It was cruel and dismissive, and I have no excuse except my own insecurity. The straightforward apology, offered without qualification or defensiveness, took me by surprise. Insecurity? You always seemed so confident in your place in that world. Victoria gave a hollow laugh. That's the trick, isn't it? Looking confident when you're terrified of being exposed as a fraud. I was always waiting for Derek's friends to realize I wasn't born into their world, that I'd clawed my way in from the outside. So you distanced yourself from me, I said, understanding dawning, from anything that might remind them, or yourself, of where you came from. It sounds terrible when you say it out loud, Victoria admitted. But yes, I kept pushing down, my background, my childhood, trying to become this perfect Lakeview Heights wife and mother. And the more I pushed it down, the more I resented any reminder of it. Including me, I concluded. Victoria nodded, eyes brimming with tears. Especially you, because you knew the real me, the scholarship girl with hand-me-down clothes and a waitress mother. The version of myself I was trying so desperately to escape. Her words stung, but I recognized the courage it took to speak them aloud. And now? I asked. With Derek's situation changing everything? Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Now I realize how hollow it all was. The striving for status, the constant performance. Derek's colleagues, the people we've spent years trying to impress, they've vanished at the first sign of trouble. Not a single call of support, just whispers and distance. And what about me? I asked, the question that had lingered unspoken between us. Am I just the convenient safety net now that the high wire has snapped? Victoria flinched at the directness of my question. I deserve that, she acknowledged. But no, it's not like that. At least I don't want it to be. When everything started falling apart with Derek, I found myself thinking of you first. Not because of the house or the money, but because you're my mother. The one person who's always loved me without conditions. Despite plenty of provocation not to, I added, allowing a small smile to soften the words. Victoria managed a watery laugh. More than plenty. She hesitated, then asked in a small voice, Can we start again somehow? Find a way to be family? Without all the baggage we've accumulated? I'm not sure we can erase the baggage, I said honestly. But we can learn to carry it differently, with more understanding of how it shaped us both. Victoria nodded slowly. I'd like that. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. We both turned to see Derek standing in the entryway, his expression grim. He looked exhausted, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled, as if he'd been wearing the same clothes for days. I need to speak with both of you, he said without preamble. It's important. Victoria straightened, tension immediately returning to her body. What's happened? Derek moved into the living room but remained standing, like a man preparing to deliver a formal address. I've been officially served with notice that I'm under investigation for securities fraud, failure to disclose material information, and potentially obstruction of justice. Victoria gasped softly. Obstruction? That wasn't mentioned before. It's related to emails I deleted when the initial inquiry began, Derek admitted, not meeting her eyes. It was stupid, panicked. My attorney says it makes everything exponentially worse. What does this mean, practically speaking? I asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Derek ran a hand through his disheveled hair. It means the likelihood of criminal charges has increased significantly. It means any assets in my name will likely be frozen pending resolution of the case. It means... He paused, swallowing hard. It means I need to ask a tremendous favor, Beatrix. One I have no right to request, but must for Victoria and the children's sake. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. My attorney believes I should separate my financial entanglements from Victoria's completely, Derek explained. To protect her and the twins from potential fallout. That includes housing. He's advised me to formally establish that I have no claim or interest in this property, that my residence here has been purely at your discretion as the legal owner. And you need my cooperation for this, I surmised. Derek nodded. A signed affidavit confirming I've never had any ownership interest in the house, that I've resided here as your guest with no financial contribution toward property costs. It would help create a firewall between my legal troubles and Victoria's financial security. I considered his request carefully. This would essentially formalize what I've been saying all along, that this house is mine, and you and Victoria have been living here by my permission, not by right. A flush crept up Derek's neck. Yes, he admitted. It would concede every point you've made from the beginning. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being dismissed and marginalized, my clear ownership of the house had suddenly become their most valuable asset, a shield against financial ruin. And how would this affect your living arrangements? I asked. Derek glanced at Victoria before answering. My attorney advises that I should establish a separate residence immediately, to strengthen the separation of our financial affairs. You're leaving? Victoria asked, her voice small despite her earlier issues with him. Derek's expression softened slightly. Temporarily, until this is resolved one way or another. It's the best way to protect you and the children. I watched the interplay between them, noting the complex emotions crossing Victoria's face. Concern, relief, worry, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Despite the troubles in their marriage, despite Derek's role in trying to remove me from the house, they remained bound by shared history and children. Their relationship was theirs to navigate, regardless of my feelings about Derek. I'll sign whatever documents your attorney prepares, I told Derek. On one condition. He looked at me warily. What condition? That you understand this isn't about leverage or revenge, I said firmly. It's about protecting Victoria and the twins, which has always been my priority, even when it wasn't yours. Derek flinched at the implicit criticism, but nodded stiffly. I understand. And thank you. After Derek retreated upstairs to pack an overnight bag, Victoria turned to me, her expression troubled. This feels surreal. Everything changing so quickly. Life often does that, I observed. Appearances of stability can vanish in an instant. Like our perfect Lakeview Heights life, Victoria said with a bitter smile. All surface, no substance. Not. All of it, I countered gently. The twins are real. Your intelligence and capability are real. Even good memories with Derek, before things went wrong, those are real too. Victoria seemed to consider this, gazing thoughtfully toward the stairs where Derek had disappeared. I don't know what I feel about him anymore, she admitted. Anger, certainly, disappointment, but also concern, and this strange sense of freedom. Freedom? I asked, curious about her choice of word. Without Derek, without the pressure to maintain appearances for his colleagues and friends, I feel like I can breathe again, Victoria explained. Like I can finally stop performing and just be whoever I actually am, whoever that turns out to be. I'd like to get to know that person, I told her. The real Victoria, not the Lakeview Heights version. She smiled, a genuine expression that reminded me of her childhood. So would I. The following weeks brought significant changes to our household. Derek moved into a sparsely furnished apartment downtown, close to his attorney's office. He visited the twins on weekends, taking them for outings to the park or museum, quality time he'd rarely prioritized before his legal troubles began. Victoria started her new position at Meridian Partners, working more reasonable hours than her previous job had demanded. She arranged her schedule to be home when the twins returned from school 3 days a week, gradually assuming more of their daily care rather than defaulting to my assistance for everything. I found myself with unexpected free time, hours in the day that had previously been filled with childcare and household management. After some consideration, I decided to volunteer at the local library, helping with their literacy program for senior citizens, many of whom had never learned to read fluently and were too embarrassed to attend regular adult education classes. "You seem happier," Victoria observed one evening as we prepared dinner together, a new routine we'd established, taking turns teaching each other favorite recipes. Tonight she was showing me how to make a Thai curry she'd learned from a colleague. "I am," I admitted, carefully slicing bell peppers. "It feels good to be useful in a different way, to use my mind and skills beyond these walls." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "I never considered that you might want a life outside of caring. For us. That was selfish of me." "Not selfish," I corrected gently. "Just limited by your own perspective. We all fall into that trap sometimes." "The twins miss having you around all the time," Victoria said. "Samuel asked yesterday if you were leaving us too, like Daddy." I set down my knife, concerned. "What? Did you tell him?" "The truth," Victoria replied. "That you're still very much part of our family, but that you're also your own person with interests and activities. That adults need to explore different parts of themselves to be happy and fulfilled." "That's remarkably insightful," I said, genuinely impressed. Victoria smiled ruefully. "I'm learning. Therapy helps." "You're seeing someone?" I asked. Surprised she hadn't mentioned this development, she nodded. "Twice a week. Originally to deal with the stress of Derek's situation, but it's evolved into something more fundamental. Looking at patterns, at how I ended up so disconnected from my own values and feelings." "And what have you discovered?" I asked, genuinely curious. Victoria was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "That I've spent my entire adult life running from perceived inadequacy. That I married Derek partly because he represented a world I thought would finally make me feel enough. That I've been using external validation, career success, social status, material possessions, to fill a void that can only be addressed internally. That's a lot of self-awareness for just a few weeks of therapy," I observed. Victoria laughed softly. "Oh, I'm nowhere near integrated all this knowledge. Intellectually understanding my patterns is one thing, changing them is quite another. But it's a start." I reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "I'm proud of you, Victoria." "Truly." She looked up, surprised. "For what? My life is falling apart. My husband is facing criminal charges. I've had to start over professionally at 40. "For having the courage to look honestly at yourself and your choices," I told her. "That's harder than maintaining a perfect facade." "Much harder." Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." As we continued preparing dinner, I reflected on how profoundly our relationship had transformed in such a short time. The snowstorm night when Victoria and Derek had thrown me out seemed like a lifetime ago, though barely 2 months had passed. The crisis that could have permanently severed our family bonds had instead created an opening for something more authentic to emerge, painful and challenging, but ultimately more nourishing than the brittle pretense that had preceded it. When the twins bounded into the kitchen a few minutes later, faces bright from playing in the garden, I felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected second chance at family. Not the perfect polished version Victoria had cultivated for her social circle, but something messier and more genuine. A family that acknowledged hurts and mistakes, that was learning to communicate honestly rather than performing assigned roles. "Grandma, look what I found!" Samuel exclaimed, holding up a smooth heart-shaped stone. "It was hiding under the rose bushes." I thought you might like it for your collection. My collection? I asked, puzzled. Of special things, he explained patiently, as if this were obvious. You always keep the drawings we make and the flowers we pick for you. I thought maybe you collect special stones too. I accepted the stone, touched by his thoughtfulness and observation. It's perfect, I told him. Thank you. Sophia tugged at Victoria's sleeve. Mom, can I help set the table? I want to use the fancy napkins for Grandma, since she's teaching you to cook. Victoria laughed. Actually, I'm teaching Grandma tonight, but yes, the fancy napkins sound perfect. As the twins bustled around setting the table, Victoria caught my eye over their heads. This is nice, she said softly. Being a real family. Yes, I agreed. It is. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, a text message arrived. From Derek. Meeting with prosecutors tomorrow. Plea deal being discussed. Will keep you both informed. Victoria read the message, her expression conflicted. A plea deal, she murmured. That means he's admitting guilt to something. It might be the wisest course, I offered cautiously. A trial would be prolonged, expensive, and public. Victoria nodded slowly. I know. It's just... She paused, gathering her thoughts. Part of me wanted him to fight, to prove there was some misunderstanding. Even though rationally I know there wasn't. That's natural, I assured her. No one wants to believe someone they love capable of deliberate wrongdoing. Did I love him? Victoria wondered aloud, the question seemingly directed more at herself than at me. Or did I love what he represented? The status, the security, the appearance of success? Perhaps both, I suggested. People and what they symbolize often become intertwined in our minds. Victoria considered this. Maybe that's why I feel so conflicted about him now. The symbol has been shattered, so I'm left evaluating just the man. And what do you see when you look at just Derek? I asked gently. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Someone talented but deeply insecure, charming but ultimately hollow, capable of affection but not true intimacy. She sighed. Not unlike myself, in many ways. Perhaps that's what drew us together, mutual recognition of similar wounds, similar masks. Her level of insight surprised me. You've been doing some serious reflection. Necessity, she said with a wry smile. When your life collapses, you either examine the rubble or get buried under it. The next morning brought another text from Derek. Meeting complete, accepting plea deal, reduced charges, no jail time, substantial fines, professional sanctions, details to follow. Victoria visibly sagged with relief when she read it. No jail time, she murmured. Thank God. I understood her relief was primarily for the twins' sake. Whatever her feelings about Derek personally, she hadn't wanted her children to experience the trauma of having their father incarcerated. That's the best outcome we could have hoped for under the circumstances, I acknowledged. Victoria nodded, then gave me a searching look. Are you disappointed? Disappointed? I echoed, confused by the question. That he's not facing more severe consequences, she clarified. After how he treated you, after he supported throwing you out of your own home. I considered her question carefully. I don't wish suffering on Derek, I said finally. His actions toward me were hurtful. Yes, but they came from insecurity and misplaced priorities. Not malice. The same patterns that led to his professional downfall. He's paying a steep price already. Loss of career, reputation, marriage, daily life with his children. I take no pleasure in that. Victoria studied my face, as if searching for signs of insincerity. Finding none, she shook her head slightly. You're a better person than I am. I'm not sure I could be so generous toward someone who had treated me as Derek treated you. It's not about being better, I corrected gently. It's about recognizing that holding on to resentment hurts me more than it hurts him. That forgiveness isn't about excusing behavior, but about freeing myself from its continued power over my emotions. "When did you get so wise?" Victoria asked, a hint of a smile playing around her lips. I laughed softly. "Around the same time I got kicked out into a snowstorm and decided I was done being a doormat. Wisdom and self-respect often arrive together, it seems." Victoria's smile faded into seriousness. "I am sorry, Mother. For that night, and for all the nights before it, when I failed to see your worth, your dignity, your right to be treated with basic respect." "I know," I said simply, "and I forgive you. Not because you deserve it or don't deserve it, but because that's what family does. We see each other's flaws and failures, and we love anyway. Not blindly or without boundaries, but persistently, even through hurt." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I hope I can teach the twins what you're teaching me. About forgiveness, about authentic family, about valuing people beyond what they provide." "You will," I assured her, "by example, which is the only way children truly learn." As Victoria left for work and I prepared for my volunteer shift, at the library, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The house around me, once a symbol of my generosity, and later a battleground for control, had transformed yet again. Now it was simply home, a place where authentic relationships were gradually replacing performance and pretense. Where mistakes were acknowledged rather than concealed beneath a veneer of perfection. Where forgiveness was offered not once but daily, in small moments of patience and understanding. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Derek's legal troubles would continue to cast shadows. Victoria's journey of self-discovery would inevitably include setbacks and resistance to change. The twins would need consistent support as they adjusted to their parents' separation and their father's diminished circumstances. But for the first time in decades, I felt hopeful about our family's future. Not because our problems were solved, but because we were finally facing them together. With honesty and growing wisdom. The snowstorm that had nearly destroyed us had instead cleared away pretense and performance, revealing the possibility of something more genuine beneath. As I stood in the doorway, looking back at the home I had reclaimed in more ways than one, I understood that true ownership wasn't about legal deeds or financial contributions. It was about creating a space where everyone could be authentically themselves, flawed, growing, sometimes stumbling, but always valued for more than their utility or performance. That was the home I had always wanted to provide for Victoria. And now, through the most unexpected and painful of circumstances, it was finally becoming reality. 6 months passed, bringing autumn's crisp air and changing leaves to Lakeview Heights. The neighborhood had settled into its familiar rhythms after the summer chaos. Children returning to school, garden parties winding down, holiday preparations beginning to appear in shop windows downtown. On the surface, life had regained a semblance of normalcy. But within our household, nothing remained as it once was. The changes, though less dramatic than the snowstorm confrontation, ran deeper and proved more lasting. Derek's plea deal had been finalized in late summer. He admitted to negligent oversight and received a substantial fine, 5 years professional probation, and a permanent bar from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. The financial penalties had wiped out his personal savings, but he'd avoided incarceration, the outcome we'd all hoped for, particularly for the twins' sake. He had found work at a small private firm owned by a former college classmate, earning a fraction of his previous salary, but grateful for the opportunity to rebuild his career from the ashes. Every weekend, he took the twins for overnight visits at his modest apartment, cooking them dinner and helping with homework. Activities he'd previously considered beneath his station when household staff, meaning me, could handle them. Victoria had flourished at Meridian Partners, her practical intelligence and work ethic earning her respect that had nothing to do with social connections or her husband's position. She joined a women's leadership network and mentored younger employees, finding fulfillment in supporting others rather than chasing status symbols. Most significantly, she had filed for divorce. The decision came not from anger or vindictiveness, but from the clear-eyed realization that their marriage had been built on mutual performance rather than genuine connection. "We were never truly partners," she explained to me one evening after sharing her decision. "We were co-investors in a lifestyle, co-curators of an image. Now that the image has shattered, there's not enough substance beneath to rebuild around." Derek had accepted the divorce with similar clarity. Their interactions remained amicable, focused on the twins' well-being rather than recriminations about the past. In some ways, they communicated more honestly as co-parents than they ever had as spouses. As for me, I had expanded my volunteer work at the library into a part-time paid position coordinating their senior literacy program. At 68, I discovered a passion and talent for teaching that I'd never had the opportunity to explore during my years of service work. 3 mornings a week, I helped elderly community members navigate books, digital media, and creative writing, witnessing the joy of accomplishment light up faces that had long been shadowed by shame over their reading limitations. The most profound transformation, however, was in my relationship with Victoria. The brittle formality that had characterized our interactions for decades gradually dissolved, replaced by something more genuine. A mother-daughter bond based on mutual respect rather than obligation or resentment. We still had our disagreements, of course. Victoria's natural decisiveness sometimes veered into steamrolling. My lifetime habit of self-sacrifice occasionally resurfaced as martyrdom. But now we could name these patterns, even laugh about them, rather than allowing them to fester beneath a veneer of politeness. Today was Sunday, our newly established family tradition of brunch in the garden when weather permitted. The twins set the table while Victoria prepared Belgian waffles, her newfound cooking hobby yielding increasingly impressive results. I arranged fresh flowers as a centerpiece, pleased by the simple domestic harmony that would have seemed impossible just months ago. "Grandma, will you help me with my family tree project after brunch?" Sophia asked, carefully arranging silverware at each place setting. "It's due tomorrow, and Mom said you know more about our ancestors than anyone." "Of course," I replied, touched that Victoria had directed her to me for family history. "I have some old photos we could include too, if you'd like." "The ones in the cedar chest?" Victoria asked, bringing a platter of waffles to the table. "I haven't looked through those in years." "Since you were about Sophia's age," I confirmed, "you were fascinated by the picture of your great-grandmother in her nursing uniform during the First World War." Victoria smiled, a wistful expression crossing her face. "I'd forgotten that. I used to imagine her as this brave heroine, saving soldiers on the battlefield." "She was certainly brave," I agreed, though mostly she worked in a field hospital miles from the front lines. Still, her stories made me want to help others, to make a difference. "Is that why you became a waitress?" Samuel asked innocently. "To help people?" Victoria tensed slightly, but I just laughed. "In a way, yes. Serving others can be meaningful work, no matter what form it takes. And it was work I could do while raising your mother on my own after your grandfather died." "Mom says you worked super hard so she could go to college," Sophia said, pride evident in her voice. "That's why she works hard now, to honor your sacrifice." I glanced at Victoria, surprised by this characterization she'd apparently shared with the twins. She met my eyes with a slight shrug and smile. "Your mother has always been intelligent and determined," I told the children. "My support just gave her the opportunity to develop those qualities." "Mom also says we should appreciate people while they're here," Samuel added, his voice suddenly serious. "Not wait until they're gone to realize how special they are." Victoria cleared her throat, clearly emotional. "That's enough philosophizing for now," she said lightly. "These waffles are getting cold." As we ate, I marveled at how our conversations had evolved. Where once discussion of my work history would have been carefully avoided as an embarrassing reminder of Victoria's humble origins, now it was woven naturally into family lore, neither glamorized nor minimized, simply acknowledged as part of our shared journey. After brunch, Victoria helped the twins clear the table while I retrieved the cedar chest from the guest room closet. Together, we spread its contents across the living room floor. Faded photographs, yellowed letters, small trinkets preserved across generations. "Who's this?" Sophia asked, holding up a black and white photograph of a solemn young woman in a high-necked dress. "My grandmother, your great-great-grandmother," I explained. "Elizabeth Harrington. She came to America alone at 16, worked as a seamstress, and eventually saved enough to open her own small tailor shop." Victoria picked up another photograph, a young couple standing stiffly before a modest farmhouse. "Your parents, right? On their wedding day?" I nodded, a wave of emotion washing over me. They worked so hard all their lives, never had much materially, but they valued education above everything. Saved every penny for my school books, encouraged me to be the first in our family to finish high school. "Just like you did for me," Victoria said softly. "The cycle continues," I observed, watching Sophia carefully arrange the photos on her poster board. Each generation trying to give the next one more opportunity, more security than they had. "I think we sometimes lose sight of what more truly means," Victoria mused. "It isn't always about bigger houses or prestigious careers. Sometimes it's about more freedom to choose, more authentic relationships, more meaningful connection." I studied my daughter's face, struck by the wisdom she'd gained through our family's upheaval. "You've come to some important realizations these past months." Victoria smiled ruefully. "Expensive lessons, but valuable ones. I don't regret the journey, despite its painful parts." As we continued sorting through family artifacts, the doorbell rang. Victoria went to answer it, returning with an unexpected visitor, Eleanor Winters, Meredith's niece and my attorney during the property dispute. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Eleanor said, glancing at our family history project spread across the floor. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off these documents personally rather than mailing them." She handed me a thick envelope. "The trust restructuring is complete. Everything is arranged exactly as you requested." "Thank you, Eleanor," I said warmly. "Would you like to join us for coffee? I've just made a fresh pot." Eleanor checked her watch. "I have a few minutes. Coffee sounds lovely." While Victoria took the twins upstairs to find additional materials for the school project, Eleanor and I moved to the kitchen. "I must say, this is quite a different atmosphere from when we last worked together," Eleanor observed, accepting the cup I offered. The tension in this house back then was palpable. "Many things have changed," I acknowledged. "All for the better, ultimately, though the path wasn't easy." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Meredith would be pleased. She always spoke highly of you, you know. Said you had a dignity that transcended circumstances." The mention of my benefactor brought a familiar warmth to my heart. I think of her often. Her generosity changed my life in ways she couldn't have imagined. "And now you're extending that generosity to the next generation," Eleanor said, gesturing toward the envelope she'd delivered, though with more wisdom than simply handing over assets without consideration. The restructured trust had been my solution to the question of inheritance. Rather than leaving everything directly to Victoria, I had worked with Eleanor to create a more nuanced arrangement. Victoria would inherit the house upon my death, but with a provision requiring her to maintain a college fund for the twins. The financial assets would be divided, half to Victoria outright, half to a trust for the twins accessible when they turned 25, with provisions for educational expenses before then. "I've learned that inheritance without guidance can become a burden rather than a blessing," I said. "Meredith gave me both the means and the wisdom to use it well. I hope to do the same for my family." Eleanor smiled. Based on what I've observed today, I'd say you're already succeeding. After Eleanor departed, I found Victoria in my bedroom, looking through an old photo album I kept on my bookshelf. I don't remember ever seeing this one before, she said, not looking up as I entered. It contains memories I kept private, I explained, sitting beside her on the bed. Things that felt too personal to share when our relationship was different. Victoria turned a page, revealing a photograph of herself as a newborn, cradled, in my arms. My exhausted face nonetheless radiated joy, my gaze fixed on her tiny features with naked adoration. You looked at me like I was a miracle, she said softly. You were, I replied simply. You are. Victoria's finger traced the outline of our figures in the photograph. I don't think I ever truly understood what becoming a mother meant to you. How completely it transformed your life, your identity, your priorities. How could you have understood? I asked gently. We don't fully comprehend our parents' experience until we've walked similar paths ourselves. And even then, each journey is unique. I treated your sacrifices as an obligation rather than a choice made from love, Victoria said, regret coloring her words. I resented debts I was never actually expected to repay. And I perhaps relied too heavily on those sacrifices to define my worth, I admitted, making them larger and more visible than necessary, creating a burden of gratitude no child should carry. Victoria closed the album, turning to face me directly. Do you think we can truly start fresh? Or will these old patterns always haunt us? I considered her question carefully. I don't believe we ever completely escape our patterns. They're etched too deeply into who we are, but we can become aware of them, catch ourselves when they emerge, choose different responses. That awareness itself is transformative. I want the twins to have a different experience, Victoria said. To feel valued for who they are, not what they achieve or provide. To understand that family love doesn't come with conditions or expectations. That's already happening, I assured her. I see it in how you interact with them now, present, attentive, accepting. They know they're loved for themselves, not as extensions of your identity or status. Victoria smiled, though tears glistened in her eyes. I had a good teacher when I finally became willing to learn. That evening, after the twins were in bed, Victoria and I sat in the garden, enjoying the last warm evening before autumn's chill set in permanently. The stars emerged above us, bright against the darkening sky, as we sipped herbal tea and contemplated the months of transformation behind us. I received an offer on the Aspen condo today, Victoria mentioned casually. Full asking price. The vacation property had been listed for sale as part of Victoria and Derek's divorce settlement, a symbol of their former lifestyle that neither could afford to maintain nor wish to be reminded of. That's excellent news, I said. Will you put the proceeds toward the twins' education fund? Victoria nodded. Most of it, though I'm also considering something else. She hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. What would you think about using part of it to renovate the guest house on the property? Turn it into a proper small home? For what purpose? I asked, curious about this unexpected suggestion. For you, Victoria replied. Not because I want you out of the main house, she added quickly, but because I've realized how little privacy and independence you've had all these years. How your entire life has been oriented around our needs rather than your own. I was momentarily speechless, touched by both the offer and the thoughtfulness behind it. You want me to have my own space, I said finally, while still remaining close. Exactly, Victoria confirmed. Your own kitchen to cook whatever you like without accommodating our preferences. A living room where you can read or watch television without children's programs blaring. A place to entertain friends without explaining or apologizing. but still close enough to be part of our daily lives, to have dinner together when you want, to see the twins easily. The suggestion held undeniable appeal. As much as I cherished our improved family dynamics, there were moments when I longed for solitude, for space entirely my own after decades of accommodating others' needs and preferences. "I think it's a wonderful idea," I said sincerely. "A perfect balance of connection and independence." Victoria smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I was afraid you might see it as another attempt to push you aside." 6 months ago, I might have, I acknowledged. But we've come too far for those old suspicions. I know your heart now, Victoria. I trust your intentions. "That means everything to me," she said softly. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching fireflies illuminate the garden with their intermittent glow. The sense of peace that had gradually replaced tension in our home felt almost tangible in the evening air, not the forced harmony of overlooked grievances, but the genuine tranquility of relationships built on honesty and mutual respect. "I've been thinking about that night," Victoria said eventually, "when we asked you to leave during the snowstorm. How different everything might be if you had simply complied, gone quietly to that senior apartment, maintained the status quo to keep the peace." "I've thought about that too," I admitted. "For so many years, that's exactly what I would have done. Sacrificed my dignity, my rightful place, to avoid conflict and maintain my relationship with you and the twins, however flawed it might be." "What changed?" Victoria asked. "Why was that night different?" I considered the question carefully, wanting to articulate the subtle but profound shift that had occurred within me. I think I finally recognized that by accepting disrespect, I wasn't preserving our relationship. I was enabling its destruction. That true connection couldn't exist where dignity was denied. That sometimes love requires standing firm rather than bending endlessly. Victoria nodded slowly. "By refusing to leave your home, you actually saved our family. The real version, not the hollow performance we'd been maintaining." "We saved it together," I corrected gently. "My standing firm was just the beginning. Your willingness to examine yourself, to grow through crisis rather than simply survive it. That's what transformed conflict into healing." Victoria reached across the space between our chairs and took my hand. "I'm prouder to be your daughter now than I ever was ashamed of your background. I want you to know that." Her words touched a place in my heart that had carried hidden bruises for decades. The awareness that my work, my circumstances, my lack of polish had been sources of embarrassment for my only child. To hear her not just accept but value our history felt like the closing of a long open wound. "Life brings us full circle in the most unexpected ways," I observed. "Who would have thought a snowstorm eviction would lead to genuine reconciliation?" Victoria laughed softly. "Or that losing a fortune would result in finding authentic family? Or that reclaiming your house would create a true home for all of us?" As darkness settled fully around us, I reflected on the journey we'd traveled. From the night I stood shivering on the porch, discarded like an inconvenient possession, to this moment of genuine connection beneath the stars. The path had been painful, marked by confrontations and revelations that stripped away pretense and forced us to see one another clearly, perhaps for the first time in decades. Yet here we sat, mother and daughter, no longer performing prescribed roles but simply being together, authentic in our imperfections, honest in our love. The house that had once been a battlefield for control had transformed into neutral ground, where each of us could claim both belonging and autonomy. The dream home that Victoria and Derek had seen as a status symbol had become something far more valuable, a place of healing, growth, and genuine family connection. As we gathered our teacups and prepared to go inside, Victoria paused, looking back at the imposing structure that had been the focus of so much conflict. "It's just a house, isn't it?" she said softly. Just walls and a roof. The real value was never in the property itself. No, I agreed, following her gaze. The real value is in what we've built inside it. Not the furnishings or renovations, but the relationships, the trust, the truth. Victoria slipped her arm through mine as we walked toward the warmly lit doorway. Thank you for not giving up on us, Mother, even when we gave you every reason. To it, some investments, I told her, are worth protecting no matter the cost. As we stepped back into the home that was now truly ours, not through legal ownership alone but through mutual respect and genuine caring, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey wasn't over. Family healing never really ends. But we had turned a critical corner, establishing a foundation of authenticity strong enough to weather future storms. The dream home Victoria and Derek had claimed as their own had finally become what I'd always intended it to be. Not a showcase of wealth or status, but a place where genuine love could flourish. A sanctuary where each family member could be fully seen, heard, and valued. A home in the truest sense of the word. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.